Hi, this is Ahavah. I made this video because, as you all know, it's the new year, and I made certain comments in my note that I just published, I think, yesterday, regarding 2025. And I wanted to more or less elaborate on those issues or items that I touched on in my letter. Now, 2025, as far as I have was made conscious of, is a year that is really a remarkable year. Now, the remarkable is the attribute that is very much relative as to remarkable in a negative sense or remarkable in a positive sense. Now, yes, a lot has already been said about 2025 by all these predictions that you can watch online. Uh, a lot of astrological analysis have been made about it, and it's there, it's out there. You may watch them. But for me, 2025 is a transformative year, and it would really change everything, and my consciousness about it is that there are areas of the world would more or less be in a positive situation and condition. However, there would also be areas in the world that would more or less find themselves in a very uh, challenging negative situation. Now, I rather focus on the positive. On the positive side, that would be China. And China would more or less be able to recover from, I mentioned this already in my previous video. Everything this year is in so many ways is China's year in so many ways. And as to how I let each moment, each day, each second of 2025 to speak of it. But that's what I'm conscious of. Now, as to the world, that would either be a negative to someone or to some areas of the world because of the impact that it may have on the respective government and country. And as you can see, the realignment is perfectly finished already. And it is really China's year. Now, it is also Israel's year. Um, for whatever reason, events will transpire that would more or less support what I've always been aware. And no matter how much other sectors are against it, because of these intervening events that will take place, they would find it very difficult to work against. And that's why I believe that in 2025, if I am correctly assess and not assessing, or correct, if I correctly uh, inferred or understood or appreciate the consciousness that was made to me. 2025 would be Israel's year also. Yes, there are wars still, but those wars or those conflict would more or less be a catalyst to this main event, which would more or less unite and make Israel fully Israel from the from the sea to the river would more or less be Israel. And that would more or less facilitate other events that would happen in the succeeding years. And because once Israel is one, I find it very, very, very offensive in so many ways. I hear Al Jazeera, other news outlets, or even governments accusing Israel of occupying, or I've already touched on this in my previous video, but in 2025, the issue of occupation would be settled. There is no occupation. How can there be an occupation when when the persons or group of persons accused of occupying a land are rather the inhabitants or the owners of the land in so many ways. Notwithstanding the intervening events that took place from the time the remnant were expelled. And it is offensive in a way it makes, because it's parroting an idea that has no foundation in history. What do I mean? Those areas that they're saying, those inhabitants, there was no Palestinian people. There was no Jordanian. There was no Syrian. There was nothing there. That was very much Ottoman control. And because of this parroting, this narrative that they are communicating, trying to make the world believe, influencing emotions and thought to that idea that there exists a people in that area and claiming it that is theirs. Yes, that may be theirs on an individual basis, because obviously whatever state is created there should recognize the inherent ownership of the property or the land. That's equity, or you're there, you have your land, you're tilling it. Okay, but to say that there is a race, there is a people, is another question. And that is the dilemma. Because here are a group of persons. Yes, there was an displacement. Yes, but that is the reality of life, the reality of history. It's very, very offensive when people are parroting a narrative that is insulting to history and to persons who knows the history. There was no Palestinian people. And that's why to claim on a collective, I'm not against persons claiming property because this were their property prior to the constitution of the state of Israel. And obviously, by equity, the state of Israel should recognize their right over that particular property. But to collectively say that because they are these persons, they have a race, they have like this, is totally offensive. And 2025 would more or less settle the issue, which would pave the way for the unification of Israel. There is no West Bank, there is no Gaza, there is no, all shall be Israel. And as to how that would take place, I leave the events in 2025 to reveal it. Yes, the war in Gaza is a very, very devastating. I find no joy in seeing the deaths, but this event took place because of a mistake, as I mentioned already in the past videos I made. It was a mistake. And again, that's why the Biden administration was very, very, very much mistaken in their approaches. And I am very much confident that now that Mr. Trump will assume on the 20th and upon his inauguration, hopefully the matter would be settled. There is no occupation. That's why if ever the refugees would yes, they are called refugees, but I think the proper term is displaced. And by reason of equity, if ever that matter should be resolved, they should be properly, like in a any conflict, there is this payment that is made to them for whatever loss that they have experienced due to the conflict under the principle of equity. But they cannot demand to return to the places that they have already, but because they cannot undo what has already been done. And because of equity, the state of Israel should recognize that. And that's why they should be properly compensated, like in any conflict, like what Japan did, Germany did, after the war, although they were very much at the losing end, but they still were made to pay for the rebuilding, for the reconstruction and everything. That is also the same case. but not in a creation of a state. It will always pose a threat to the existence of Israel. And that's why those who are proposing or proponent or advancing that idea that a two-state solution is the answer, they are the culprit in this conflict. They are that proposition is evil to its very core, because you're giving or fueling aspirations that has no place now or ever. And that's why it is wrong to say, to propose, to advance such a proposal. It will never end the conflict, because the other would always work to destroy the other. And those who are proposing this are the very persons who are the culprits, or the person who should be held accountable for the events that are transpiring now and have transpired during October 7th. They are the persons who should be held accountable. And any person who is proposing or even supporting such a proposition, they have blood on their hands, because peace will not come. The other will only work to destroy the other. It will always be a threat to the existence of Israel, to which I cannot consent to. In 2025, if all should come to pass, will put everything in order. The displays will be properly compensated, given the amount that is equitable to their suffering, to their displacement, but no state. A state will always be a gun pointed to the head of Israel. The trigger is the only one time that is in question. That's why all those who are working for it, I say to you, the blood that was spilled now in Gaza and previously are on your hands. It is your doing. And to the officials of the state of Israel, be reminded of your loyalty. It is to the state and to the people, and no foreign power, or how mighty power they may be, must you or shall we say, can you allow yourself to be subordinated? It is only the welfare and good of the people of Israel and collectively the state of Israel that is primordial. And essential. All else is nothing. And I hope, as Mr. Trump would assume his office, he would more or less work towards this by allowing and this to take place, and second, by gathering support for this. It is an injustice to those who are displaced to remain there. They have to be relocated and compensated for whatever harm the events that took place in 1967 or earlier that placed them in such a condition, but not the state. There is no boundaries to talk about. Yes, they may be given land, but it is not under a new state. They have to recognize the state of Israel because they would only secure that land and that compensation under the auspices of the state of Israel. So that's with Israel. I hope that the Gaza conflict would finally be put to an end and the hostages would be freed and the rebuilding of Gaza. Gaza will have a new name. I hope and pray that the officials of the state of Israel would, by the collective will of those who reside in Gaza, have name it or attribute a new name to it so that the memory of all this would somehow be put to the past. And Gaza would more or less be a very beautiful place. No longer will it hold the devastating ordeal of late, of recent past. And they would live in harmony with everyone. And then I guess yes, but not a state. They may have, for purposes of only administrative, certain people who would administratively govern them, but not this. I've already mentioned this in a previous video. Now, hopefully, everything by mid 2025 is settled. Israel is fully one, meaning there is no other state except Israel. And I hope that Mr. Trump would rally the other countries. That's why 2025, in so many ways, is a defining moment in West Asia, because if all that I'm speaking should take place, then terrorists would have less influence in the area because, like, look at Dubai, look at Qatar. So more or less that would be replicated in every area. And West Asia, like China, would more or less prosper. And that's why Mr. Trump is very much a key player in all this. And I hope he used his influence and his office to this endeavor. China also, I hope China would assist the United States rather than oppose in bringing to an end, because it is also in China's interest. If this West Asia is very much purged of all these conflicts, Syria would be rebuilt and Lebanon would be rebuilt, and you'll have a replica of how Dubai and Qatar is now in each of this area. Would you imagine? You know, in 2025 also, Iran would more or less find its freedom. Freedom from the tyranny of a lost ideology. Because of the events that will take place, the surrounding West Asia, its influence would more or less be rendered nothing. And soon it will implode. And the people, I hope and pray, would be free. And imagine West Asia without all this conflict. Imagine the progress. Imagine the prosperity that it will bring. And this is all to the advantage of China and the United States. If they correctly play their cards, so to speak. And also to the countries like Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Syria, Iran, Iraq, the evil of terrorism will have no place in those areas. Why? Because people like in Qatar, in Dubai are very much taken care of. And I'm very elated in the actions taken by MBS in Saudi Arabia and soon in Iran also. I hope that someone there, I'm not in favor of returning Iran into a monarchy. I'm in favor of the people by their own collective consciousness and will determine their fate. The autocratic structure that existed for over 30 years or 40 years, if I'm not mistaken, has lost its significance. And the people know, see it. And 2025 would mark a very, very significant change in Iran. And I hope that the people there would, in a few years after such an event, would more or less be like Dubai, more or less like Qatar. Progress. Long have they been imprisoned in in such a structure. And I know there are elements in the country that soon, by God's hand, they shall succeed. And that may take place, and I pray and hope, in 2025. With regards to the Philippines, where I'm residing, it's disheartening to see and hear you, and very much saddened, how Singapore, Indonesia, Malaysia, Taiwan, China are doing very well. And unless this politics of patronage is totally purged from the psyche and system of each inhabitants of this land, I do not call them Filipinos because that is not the name of this land. This land is known for not, is known by its neighbors in ancient time under a different name. I refer to those who are residing here as inhabitants, because to say that they're Filipinos is to associate and attribute a name that is totally alien to the real identity of the inhabitants of this land. And I hope in 2025, by the grace of God, the people would realize and be conscious of that they're not Filipinos. A name that is derived from a monarch in Europe. They have a rich ancestry even before the Spaniards came. They just have to rediscover it. The Spaniards had perverted their consciousness to their advantage so that they could easily colonize them. That's why it's very entrenched in their psyche. But the government should, rather than continuing to adopt a name that is alien to the inhabitants of this land. And I hope in 2025 that would be realized too. It's only then that the promise that this land holds can be unraveled, can be manifest. I've already mentioned this a long time. And I hope in 2025 there would be efforts to really work to the introspective activity of understanding and knowing the heritage of the people inhabiting these islands before the colonizers came. It is only then can they truly find their identity, without which they would be as they are now, drifting into nothingness, because they do not know who they are. They are lost in a name that is not theirs, in a name that is imprinted in their consciousness, not for their own welfare, but for the welfare of a foreign power. And I hope in 2025, there would be efforts to really connect to the reality and identity of the inhabitants of the islands in this area. Now, with regards to the structure, this is not the structure. This is a structure that was, again, instituted by foreign powers to perpetuate their influence and their interests. And it is only by determining and devising or developing or formulating a new structure of governance, of society, can the inhabitants of this land can truly be true to who they are. The politics of patronage has long been an evil that pervades every corner of society. And I hope in 2025, this too would be lost already, or removed or purged. Yes, the path towards this is not an easy path, but everything begins with the first step. The Philippines, as they call them, or this land, has long been lagging. And you see why. There's no sense of patriotism. All is propaganda. All is for the benefit of their own. And if what I am made conscious of should take place, each and every person that is guilty of this evil will be purged. So that's for the Philippines. For the world, I guess 2025 is a beginning, a change. If all that I mentioned should take place, West Asia, China, India, conflicts will no longer be there. Conflicts exist because it perpetuates certain instrumentalities in their position. And if a careful investigation of all the conflicts that have transpired in the world, it will point to one place. But soon that place will no longer have influence or power. And no more conflicts shall arise because they will no longer be able to do what they have been doing in the past. For the world would know what they have done. So that is what I made conscious of 2025, and hopefully, yes, the path towards what I've mentioned is not an easy path, but it is a path that each must take. And hopefully, by 2026, majority of all that I have mentioned has been fulfilled. So until next time, this is Ahavah, Lady of Jerusalem and the land of Chrysanthemum. Ta-ta.